There's a waiting internally. You're waiting on people. You're waiting on maybe information because it's taking a while to get to you. So you have to think about waiting from an internal point of view too, as well as your customer waiting. Because when you fix those waitings internally, you get your product or your service out much faster to the customer.
Right. Hello, my friend, and welcome to this Business Monday episode of A Call to Leadership. I'm Dr. Nate Saul, your host. And every Monday, we tackle the toughest challenges facing business owners today. Whether you're struggling to keep your business afloat or finding yourself drowning in the overwhelming nature and the never-ending stream of business management tasks. This third installment, I've invited Joe Thompson back, who is an expert in Six Sigma lean management, to join me on this very important installment. I can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is A Call to Leadership. Joe, welcome back.
Nice to be back.
Yeah, so we are working through a series called So You're Going Out of Business, and we're identifying what a great title, because that's like, yeah, that could be anybody at any time, really. That doesn't mean that you are currently facing an imminent closure or shutdown. You could be slowly going out of business. You could be going out of business for the next 10 long years.
Yeah, you might be working your way there.
Right. Yeah. And so we've embarked on this conversation, which many people might think, oh no, so boring, this idea of waste in an organization. But it's not at all, really. I mean, it's really a hallmark of moving from the possibility for having issues that you can't ever hope to resolve, and sometimes tons of blind spots, to the highest level of productivity in an organization. I mean, that's really ultimately what we want, right? We want the most efficient, the most effective organization from all aspects. And we identify it by really looking at, what are we wasting? So we looked at the first two episodes. If you haven't heard those episodes, check those out. And we're on our third installment. And as you'd mentioned in off air, these are not necessarily in any particular order. In other words, does one build upon another, or are they interchangeable?
They are interchangeable. I put them in the order because I use the acronym downtime, which is pretty common in the business. So I think if you can remember downtime, it's an easy way to remember, we did defects, we did overproduction, and today, obviously, we're on W. So right. We're on waiting. So, the thing about waste that you need to first think of it as anything that doesn't add value to your customer. So if it's not a key part of your process, if it's not something that is being used to get the job done, it's waste. So, identifying it is the first thing. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is identify it, and then you have to solve for it. Right. So you need people in your organization that can identify and solve for waste.
So if someone's new to this conversation, say they hadn't listened to the first two episodes where we introduced it, and for simplicity's sake, why is waste, at least the identification of it, eminently important? I mean, I know it seems obvious, but I think we should discuss it.
It seems obvious, but very few companies do it. I mean, very few companies actually look for it because it's an easy thing to ignore. Bill's been doing his job a particular way, for so long. There's no one looking at it to see if it can become more efficient or not. We spend money sometimes just to get it done, or just to get it paid for, or just to get it over with, when we shouldn't be. So there's wasteful spending. There's time being wasted, which is money. This all boils down to your bottom line. I mean, you want to immediately immediately impact your bottom line, you're not going to go do some R&D work and develop a new product. That's not going to do it immediately. That's probably going to cost you upfront money. You're probably not going to identify any kind of new buyers for your product.
But just stop right there, because someone does that.
That's what they do.
Someone
exactly.
says, right, well, we need to make more money. Let's go invest in R&D.
Yeah.
Let's go find
we
new products.
need to make a new widget.
Yeah. Let's go hire more people.
Yeah.
It happens every day.
Yeah.
And likely someone listening is like, yeah, that's me. I've been in that situation. I mean, oftentimes it's the go-to, right? It's what we think, okay, that's because I need to have more revenue, right? Because if I think, okay, if I can find ways to increase revenue, I can increase the possibility for a bottom line. But that's only one part of it. And that's a part of it we need to look at. I would argue sometimes last.
Yeah, because sometimes it costs upfront to increase revenue. And then you have to factor in, obviously, if you're having holding costs on that revenue, how much maybe you have to hire someone in new, you need a new sales guy to go out and hit this new area to bring in more revenue. And then what is the cost of that up front? It may pay off in the long run, but if you want to end wasteful spending and everything now, you look for waste.
Yeah. I mean, it's the equivalent of wanting to go cut a tree down and having a chainsaw that is the blade is not sharp at all, and you will waste so much time trying to get that tree down. You think, well, I just need to get that tree down, because if I can get that tree down, then I can cut the timber and I can make wood from it. But that's not the first step. The first step is, well, how much time am I going to waste?
They never consider time. Time is just. I don't know if it's a factor of generational changes, but time seems to be less important nowadays. How long it takes you to do a job seems to be less important, and that costs companies a lot of money when you start adding that together. How many employees do you have? How many minutes or half hours a day are they wasting per week, per month, per year?
Right.
What does that cost you?
Right.
Those are things you should be looking at and figuring out.
And which is a great conversation starter for this part of the journey on waiting, because if we just use that simple analogy, right? So we get to the job site and we realize, oh no, my tools are not sharp.
Right.
Then what do I do?
Or my supplies aren't here.
Right.
The first thing people think of in waiting is our customers are waiting.
Right.
Are we getting it out fast enough?
Right.
Is our shipping good enough? But there's a waiting internally. You're waiting on people. You're waiting on maybe information. You're waiting on a part that comes to you next that's taking a while to get to you. So you have to think about waiting from an internal point of view too, as well as your customer waiting. Because when you fix those waitings internally, you get your product or your service out much faster to the customer.
Right. Yeah, it comes to mind, the very first type of waiting that I think about when it comes to the customer is the grocery line. This is probably one of the most easy to recognize and easy to assimilate or think about in your own life, right? You're in the checkout line, and any number of things can happen in this line, right? Mm-hmm. One can be the person has coupons, like, oh, you got 30 coupons. That's great. Call your spouse. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be there on time. Or, there was a commercial for a while where people are using cash, and the credit card companies wanted people to use credit cards more. So they had this commercial about people counting change, pennies by pennies, as they pulled out their you remember that? So those are a couple factors. Another one could be where someone has to get an override by a manager. Somebody's buying cigarettes, and the cashier's got to go to that area to pick up the cigarettes. Sometimes there's a change in the tellers at the time. The teller. Well, that's at a bank. Same thing, right? Same concept. But at the grocery store, they're changing the person who's waiting on everyone, and then you have to count the drawer out.
lots of variables there.
Yeah.
And variables are the things that ultimately, the more variables you control in your company, the less waste you're going to have. The more variables you control, the less waiting you're going to have.
And how does that impact the bottom line? I mean, I know it's, again.
Oh man, it is another one of those buildups of, okay, how much time is this costing, per person,
right,
per the next person waiting. I think we identified this maybe back in the 70s as bottlenecks. Mm-hmm. And originally, bottlenecks were always thought of to be bad. We found in manufacturing that sometimes a bottleneck is okay. And that's a whole nother podcast. But for this example on waiting today, we're going to consider all bottlenecks to be bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you need information from me, like say you're waiting on me to give you a number for the closing of a house, and I have other things that I'm doing, I have other things that I'm prioritizing, and it's taken me 3 hours to get back to you. Well, you've been waiting for 3 hours for this information, and the sad thing is that information travels so quickly now that should be a very easy thing if you have an IT person in your company to take a look at and to make sure that one, you're not over communicating, and two, that you're communicating on time. So that's an effective way to stop wasting time and keep people waiting.
I love just hanging out right there, over communicating, because this doesn't just apply to products and it applies to service. It applies to any organizational environment, right? Now, I don't know if you've ever had anyone in your camp that sent you like a 3-page email, right? Color coded and all of these variables that perhaps aren't necessary.
Yeah, it won't be read by me. It will be sent right back.
Would it?
Please edit this.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't have time to read a 3-page email. Call me on the phone, give me the gist of it. You wasted a lot of time writing a 3-page email, and I'm not going to waste more time reading through it.
Right. And I've heard, and I've begun to implement this, that if your email is going to be over a paragraph long, just pick up the phone.
Right.
Because the time it takes to fashion an email like that. Now, some people can type quickly, but generally speaking, it takes quite a bit of time to format, and then there's some editing and revising it. And you could spend 20, 30 minutes putting together an email that could be handled in what, a 4-minute call?
Right. And it's just going to get sent back to you if it's sent to me.
You heard that. But that's important. So now, over brevity can be a problem too, because there's too much ambiguity in that email. So I suspect there's a sweet spot with communication.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And over communication really falls in line with overproduction that we talked about last time. But what can happen when you communicate it to 5 people? Those 5 people don't know, should I act on this? Are the other 4 people acting on it? And what happens? Everyone just waits for someone else to do it. And now you have a waiting problem again.
Right.
So in an office setting, because most people look at lean management from lean manufacturing point of view, but lean management really covers service, office, every kind of business. The waiting on, just a paper to make it from, accounting to wherever you need to sign off on it. You'd be surprised if you follow that paper. Like, boy, this is taking I should have had this hours ago. If managers would just follow that paper, I guarantee you this, it may feel like a waste of time at first, but look at that paper. Watch what it goes through. If you're still on a paper system, which a lot of people, they have to be because they need wet signatures or whatever, follow it through, or follow an email through the line that it went to before it got to you. And I bet you there's several steps you can cut out on just the length of time that it takes to get something to the next person who's waiting on it. Mm-hmm. Does that person even need to be involved? Can you just skip them and keep them from waiting altogether and go on to something else? Those are things that really have to be broken down. You need a good integrator in your company. I know that word's become popular.
Yeah.
We used to call them operations people, right, or implementers. You need a good implementer, not only to identify what the problem is, to be on the floor following what the problem is, and then to be able to analyze it well enough to solve it.
Right.
Because until you solve it, you haven't stopped the problem of waiting.
I'm glad you brought that up, because someone listening who is a CEO or a business leader is thinking, I don't have time for this. Right. My roles are all, I'm pressed. It's not my genius zone. And it's important to identify that expert who can work in that genius zone, i.e. an implementer.
Hire an integrator consultant.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, oh yeah. Hint, hint, right? So the integrator, I want to just take a stop off here, because then the next question is, well, what should I be looking for? And I'd like you to talk about a few different aspects of it. I'll just kick off with one. You've got an integrator when their response is to everything you want to do is, when are we going to do that? That's one. Let's just play a little game. You have an integrator when.
You might be an integrator.
You might be an integrator if this is what you say, because an integrator is concerned with waste, and concerned with time, concerned with prioritizing and understanding that we can't do everything you ever wanted to do, because it doesn't get us to where we want to go in the time frame that is necessary for us to make sure that bottom line is healthy. So that's one.
So I can give you them just in a really quick order. An integrator is going to ask what, how much, and when. That's it. So the what is identifying what it is you really want to do, because sometimes I'll get 6-7 ideas a day, right? What is it we really want to do? Then my job as an integrator is to figure out, how are we going to do that? And do we need to spend money on it? And if so, how much? And then when do we need it done? Once you have those factors in line, and they're realistic, okay? And that's the thing that CEOs, COOs, CFOs, that's what they need to really hone in on is, am I setting a realistic expectation for this project? Do I have the manpower that it takes? Do I have the money that it takes? And do I have the time that it takes to get it done? So if you don't have those things, if you don't have a plan, or you don't accept the plan from your integrator, we'll make it, I'll give you 5 minutes, you're setting yourself up for that failure on that plan, which means you're probably going to waste time, you're going to waste money, and then you're not going to get the results that you wanted.
Right.
So.
So how do you find an integrator?
That's difficult.
Yeah.
They say an integrator is 1 out of 4 visionaries. But you got to remember, in the population, not everyone is a visionary and not everyone is an integrator, So to say 1 in 4 people are integrators is really, a gross miscalculation of the idea of what an integrator visionary relationship is.
Right.
So they are more rare because they're we start out life pretty creative as kids, right? And then as we get older, we're taught that problem solving is very important. But people have either problem solving brains or they have very creative minds, and they can, everyone is a little bit of both if you're in there. But someone who sees things as systems, they're an integrator. And someone who sees the possibilities in things, they're visionaries. So,
and every so often someone comes along who is a hybrid, right? Or I would call them a day walker in some ways. They now, and that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone who is an integrator can't have vision.
True.
And everyone who is a visionary can't have an integrative ability. But certainly there are areas that you have natural traits, skills, and behaviors that are developed in a lane, right? And we need each other. Even if you're a visionary, and you have some integration skills, you still need an integrator.
Yes.
Period. Right? I mean, look at Steve Jobs, for example. Right? I use him quite a bit on the show just because I did a lot of research on him. Great vision, great integration, but he knew that he needed integrators within his organizations, i.e., a Tim Cook, to make sure that they could steer the ship in a direction that led to success for everyone, right? And so that he could really stay in his lane of pushing
as a leader as well.
Yeah, as a leader, yeah.
Because a lot of times your visionaries in the companies, they are the leaders of the companies. They're really directing the ship, and good leaders surround themselves with good people.
Right.
Bad leaders who want to let their ego get in the way, they will surround themselves with people who just, answer yes to whatever they want. Yeah. So I would always say hire a good integrator. And if you're an integrator and you have an idea about starting a company, bounce it off of a good visionary. Because a lot of times they can make the dream bigger.
Right.
And that's what you really need to be, is uncomfortable in your dream. It should scare you. And that's one of the things we've talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we talk about, it's a great example as we push ourselves forward. What we're doing with Great Summit is our vision uncomfortable? And if it's not, we need to push it out because it has to be bigger. And on the other side of it, somebody said, well, what if it's too lofty of a vision? Then maybe you just can't achieve it in your lifetime. Maybe somebody else takes the baton. I mean, look at Elon Musk, great example, right? There's stuff that he is planning that he'll never see in his lifetime. Colonization of other planets, things like that, right? But that's part of the idea of lofty vision. We've got, I know it sounds crazy, but 1,000-year plan for our Great Summit and our ministry side is like, oh, you know what? It's quite possible 1,000 years will come, just like 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years later came, right? And so on and so forth. So why not set a vision out there that goes so far beyond you? I mean, how much more compelling and worthy and attractive is that, right? And so that's where big vision comes in. And then the integrators can identify what steps can be accomplished in the time we have available to us, whether it be a week, a year, a month, a decade, or until we're no longer on this earth.
So I have a rule that I use. It's my personal rule. You're not going to find it written down somewhere. When I go into a company, and let's say we're dealing with wait times, okay? There may be 10 different reasons why you're waiting on something or what's causing you to wait. I always say identify 5 to 10 of them, right? Prioritize your top 3, work on 1. Because when you're trying to accomplish eliminating waste in your company, you don't know all the times what the change in keeping this person from waiting, is it going to affect anybody down the road? So concentrating on completing a task, one task, will help you see further down the road than having to mix all these different formulas together to try and cure it all at once. It didn't happen all at once. It probably little by little started to get out of hand. So you're not going to fix it all at once. So that's why I said have the, have the constitution to know, hey, these things may take time.
So that's brilliant. Identify 10, prioritize 3, work on 1. And you know this just as well as I do. The best place to do that is on a whiteboard.
Yes. I love the whiteboard. Couldn't live without it.
Every integrator's eyes light up when you
give me all the
whiteboard.
Computer technology that you want, but a marker in the hand on a whiteboard in a room full of people who are thinkers is an amazing tool.
Yeah. So get the whiteboard out, or it can be a giant Post-it note, whatever it is, right? Get it out and get that dialed in so that you've got this upside down pyramid, if you will.
Yes. A funnel.
And it helps to create clarity. And we've said this before, clarity is power, right? Ambiguity, cloudedness, right? It's also part of waste.
Yes.
And so get clear on that formula so that you can focus on it. And then that will also eliminate and reduce what we're talking about today, the idea of waiting.
Yeah.
Right? Because if your priorities are ambiguous, you're waiting, people are waiting on you to figure out what's next. And there's wasted time in waiting because, well, we were waiting for you to go down this path. And then you thought, well, I'm shifting.
Mm-hmm.
And now we've lost so much opportunity for effort because we haven't started with what? Just the planning piece.
Yeah. Well, I always say there's powers in meetings if meetings are done the right way. So if you have an idea that you haven't fleshed out, there's nothing more important than gaining the clarity on that, right? And having help to help you flesh it out. That's the key. Like sometimes we're sitting at our desk and we're thinking about something and we're like, how are we going to accomplish this? That is what your team is for.
Yeah.
Your team is there to give you different perspectives. And when you can start to funnel down, you start with a big ambiguity and you start to funnel it down and funnel it down and funnel it down until you get to, hey, what is the main concept here that we're going for? Like, what is the core of this idea that I have? Now you have something tangible that you can start to work with. Too many intangibilities, it just creates chaos inside of an organization. So the clearer you are on the clearer direction I can give you to the store, the less turns and tribulations you're going to have along the way. So just think about that. An idea is the beginning of a direction, right?
That's right.
And as clear as that idea can be, takes away a lot of those variables that are going to cause you wasted money, wasted time, people waiting, customers waiting.
So this is good that you bring up the meeting because someone listening is thinking, okay, meetings are a waste of time. And
sometimes they are.
Sometimes they are. And they will create more waiting because now I'm waiting to finish this meeting that's useless. Or I don't have the meeting at all as a leader because I think I'd be wasting time having this meeting. And then we have a disconnect because now we don't have cohesiveness. And another thing we don't have is communication, which also is essential to reducing waste, effective communication within an organization, right? Because that creates, again, more cloudedness, more ambiguity, more confusion, and less clarity. So if you're concerned about, well, either A, I'm an absentee leader who doesn't have meetings. B, my meetings are unclear, so people are already checked out. Or C, I don't even know where to begin. I believe in meetings. What can you speak to that for a moment? Because I think that piece is so critical to reducing, eliminating the waste that we're talking about. Well, my friend, you're going to have to wait until next week to tune in to hear about the meetings and the people and the stellar teams we create by eliminating the waste of waiting. But you don't have to wait to hear the show again, because this Wednesday, an expert will come on to talk more about leadership. I'm so glad you're here. You mean so much to this program, and I can't wait to be with you again.